Emerging markets versus the S&P 500. This is one heck of a round trip on this chart here in relative performance for emerging markets versus the S&P 500. Emerging markets outperformed the S&P 500 some 4x, so 4 times over the 10-year period from 2001 to 2010, only to give it all back over the subsequent 10 years. It's interesting to look back and reflect on these periods. The structural bull market in emerging versus US featured a period of tech stagnation following the dot-com bubble burst on the US side of things versus a big economic catch-up by emerging markets, especially China, and a massive commodities bull market on the emerging market side of things. The subsequent bear market in emerging versus US, on the other hand, saw a period of economic stagnation across emerging markets, a secular bear market in commodities. Meanwhile, the US tech sector had a decade-long renaissance. So it's hard to make forecasts, especially about the future, but as to what happens next, in terms of the next decade, it's probably going to show up in the form of a big secular trend in a chart like the one that we're looking at today. I will say one thing though, that does kind of help, and that's valuations, especially over these types of periods. And at the extreme around the peak of the dot-com bubble, emerging markets traded at almost an 80% discount versus the US. Fast forward at the peak of the EM frenzy, so at the peak of that chart there, emerging markets traded at about a 30% premium versus the US. Now, as I write, when I last checked, emerging markets are trading around a 50 to 60% discount versus the US. It's not as extreme as that 80% discount that I mentioned before, but it is a major discount, and it gives one pause to ponder if all the bad things about emerging markets that everyone seems to be talking about is already in the price, and perhaps all the good things about the US market that also everyone seems to be kind of fully aware of is perhaps also in the price, and perhaps then some. So thinking about that along with the completion of that massive round trip, certainly at the least makes one want to go and do a little bit more homework on this one. And it's certainly one of the things that we're looking at here at Top Down Charts. And if you want to check out more charts like this, definitely have a look at our Substack or go and visit the website topdowncharts.com.